I just passed the state exam. I called Dale, called Ben. I've got an appointment tomorrow morning. I show up tomorrow morning, meet with Damien. Damien hands me a stack of papers like this I have to sign my life away with. We don't accept firstborns. Or lastborns. Or the ones in the middle. Those are the dangerous ones in there. Trust me, I know. You sign all the papers. You are now officially part of the company. Do you now have an active license?
No.
Well, I thought we had to have an employer to have an active license.
Right, but now you have to submit the paperwork.
We have to have a registered employer. So the word isn't just employer, it's really registered employer. And who could register as our employer?
We have to register on the permanent business website.
Yeah, but who can register?
Broker.
A broker? Or?
Attorney.
No,
Sales associate.
sales associates can't do shit. You'll figure that out as we go along.
Your HR has.
A builder, a contractor?
Developer, thank you. In other words, GL Homes could hire me and register with the department as my employer. Unless GL possibly has a brokerage firm that they put all their licensed agents in. Do you have the right to review the exam if you fail it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. How many of you plan on doing that? By the way, when you come out of the testing, you get an 8.5 by folded over piece of paper. When you open it, pray you don't see numbers. If you see numbers, they're going to be 74 or less. And then they're gonna, in there, if you fail, they're gonna give you a list of topics that you did bad in. Well, everybody that's brought me back has brought me back the same bad list. That list wasn't specific for you. Do you think somebody sits back there after your test is graded to figure out which shit you got wrong? No, they don't care. Why? I'm going to get more money out of you. $31 and something every time. So it's either you pay me now or you pay them a whole lot later. I don't cost you anything except aggravation. Anybody have questions about the exams, either class or state, so that we can end this discussion and move on?
Do I study in two perspective, exam, class exam, or state exam?
Yes,
Do I study in that perspective?
yes.
Isn't that confusing?
No. Because what's highlighted could also be a question on the state exam. And what's not highlighted could also be a question on the state exam. So, here's the way it really should work in your brain. You need to study everything, knowing that the highlights are the key to the class exam. What's the key to the state exam? The book. But we start with little pieces and work our way up. If you participate in class and you do your homework like good little girls and boys, guess what you're going to do? And if you don't, guess what you're going to do? Fail. And probably by 3 or 4 points. But you know what? I'd rather get a 60 than a 74.
That
It's not to say I'm stupid. I've had people get 74s. I don't know. For editorial purposes, on the top of page 28, just a thought with this area. If you're having trouble understanding some of the English words that may be used here, talk to me. Don't just fluff it off. Let's talk about it. You have to be able to speak the language. Can't survive in a country if you don't ultimately learn how to speak the language of that country. Well, this is FREC1. Of course, in today's world, the more languages you can speak, the better off you are. That's why it amazes me when people come, when I meet people from Europe, speaking 4 and 5 different languages. And I'm struggling with English. Actually, I speak 2 languages. English and Southern. And when it gets about 8:30, 9 o'clock, it'll kick in.
That's no joke.
Because I
That's no
don't
joke.
enunciate words. Like, I wouldn't, like we talk about slipping to the store. But that's not ing, that's in. All right. The class you're taking is pre-license or post-license?
Pre-license.
Because?
Because we are on license.
Because we're taking this test, class before we got one. And what would be the course we took right after we passed?
Post.
Post. And what would we call the class you would take every 4 years for your continuing education?
Continuing education.
Continuing education.
Goes hint.
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
Why is there an exam after the initial exam for licensing?
Because the material in there is different. Now, I'm not just repeating the class. The broker's post license, one is actually 2 30-hour classes. Sometimes they do them together, sometimes they'll offer them separate. One's on investment, the other is on office management. Now, office management to me makes all the sense in the world if you've got the broker's license. For one very simple reason, you're going to be running a business. How many hours do you have to take for the initial class?
64.
63. For your post license,
45.
for your continuing ed, 14. That's sales associate. Broker. Broker's course is 72 hours. The continuing ed is the post license, excuse me, is 60. And the continuing education is 14. So when I teach the live 14-hour course, I'll have anywhere from inactive sales associates to active workers. Makes for a fun class. Because I think those two would have totally different perspective of the real estate business. In order to be able to take the broker's course, or actually the broker's state exam, you have to have done your 45 hours. Now, that's not a big deal because of, you have to do your 45 hour before your first expiration date. Your first expiration date will not necessarily be 2 years, because the license year is 2 years. But you're placed in the one that you're closest to that doesn't exceed 24 months. So now we'll illustrate that for you later. Is there an exam with the post license?
Yes.
And you have to get a 75.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's 100 questions.
Yes.
And referring back to page 26, the 4-year college graduate with a degree in real estate, the only thing they have to do is continue their education, the 14-hour class. The attorney kind of jumps around. They don't have to take FREC1, but they have to take the sales associate exam. They have to take the broker's course, they have to pass the broker's course, they have to do the post license. But they don't have to do the continuing ed, because the continuing ed they do for their bar membership is shifted to qualify.
Is anybody grandfathered in from the continuing ed?
Nope,
So you could have
not
been,
that I know of, no.
you could have been a broker for 40 years in the state.
42?
And you still need to.
Why? This book changes approximately 20% every year, times 42. And they screw me up almost every year because they change pages and put them in different places. The 45-hour course, I would take that as soon as you could after you got the license.
Is that offered here in the school as well?
Of course.
Just checking.
And it's not quite as expensive. The 14-hour course, if you take it live, there's no exam. If you take it online, there's a 30-question exam. I typically teach it 2 Fridays in a row in February and August, because the expirations are the 31st of March, which is why I just recently finished a 45-hour course. and September the 30th. By the way, if you get a chance and to visit Orlando and go to one of the FREC meetings where they do the discipline, you can get 3 hours credit toward your continuing ed. And a good education. And you'll find out real quick that things we talked about weren't bullshit. Especially when you watch people stand up there and lose their license. And you can tell by the look on their face, you can't understand where's the problem. Mom has certain rules. And Mom can get extremely upset if you don't follow rules. All you get here is a pink slip. There are certain things you must do and certain things you must not do. And we'll get to those as time allows. Okay, so I've taken my sales course, passed the state exam. I did my 45 hours, and my license just renewed last September. I have now been active well more than 2 years. So I want to take my broker's course. See, so you've got a 2-year experience. Question. I do all the education I'm supposed to do. I renew the license like I'm supposed to do. And I've had a license with a friend of mine for the last 3 years. I've done no business. Do I still meet the experience requirement to get the broker's license?
Yes.
Yes.
If the answer is yes, tell me what the experience has to be.
To be the pre-registered with the broker. for that
You
one.
you have to be employed.
And active.
Is it the same thing as like the concept of being employed?
Not the same thing, exactly the same thing. And if you tell me you're active, it doesn't tell me your work habit. It tells me you have a registered employer. And it doesn't necessarily even tell me it's a broker. If I tell you I'm current and active, what's that mean?
You meet the guidelines of the state.
Current means what? I'm up to date
With your
on all
paperwork.
requirements, money and education. And active?
You're employed.
Tell me, describe me with the same scenario, but not employed. Current,
And you're registered.
I don't have to be registered.
Current.
If I'm inactive, I'm not registered with anybody.
Right.
Because if I'm registered with somebody, I'm active. So you gotta get it in your head that active does not indicate production. Working the business is incorrect terminology in this discussion. I don't have to be working in the business to do anything. I have to have a license and a registered employer. And I need to keep that license current by doing the education and paying the money.
So if I switch over from salesperson to broker and proceed with the guidelines, the state doesn't require anything on the form about how many transactions I performed in the past
No,
X
sir.
amount of years, nothing. No track record, they just want you to meet the criteria.
And how do you get experience?
You come to a place like this,
But you haven't sold anything.
hmm?
You haven't sold anything.
I don't care.
We don't care. As long as you do what we tell you to do. See, we're not hiring you for what you did yesterday. We're not hiring you for what you did today. We're hiring you for what you're gonna do for us over the next 10, 15 years, or 20 or 30. You run off on me after we help you get started, you better hide. Nah, go ahead, be stupid. I don't know. You have to remember, people, you have to have the license before you can make any money. How many of you have already begun your first assignment? How many people we have on the list?
Over 75.
Over 35?
Over 75.
Over 75? Which one? Who else? Raise your hand. How many?
I have 52 right now.
33.
How many people you have on your phone?
A lot more.
A lot more. So,
I started it.
stupid little thing right there is thousands of dollars of commission going to someone else. And don't be afraid to tell them that you're getting a license. Or if you want, I'll tell them. A couple times I've threatened to do that. Yelled at them. I want you to tell the world you're getting a license. Why? Because then you don't have an option. Now you have an option. I rarely go to Facebook, but this would be a time. Can't stand this. I really want to know, the world to know, when I go to the bathroom. All right, the 2-year experience to get a broker's license. Number one, does not have to be consecutive. It just has to be 2 out of the last 5 years. It doesn't have to be in Florida. It could be Georgia or California or England or Spain. If you have maintained in Spain, what would that be considered an active license for 2 years, and then you showed up in Florida, you would be qualified to go for the broker's license. You would not have to do the sales associate's license. Because you've already met the requirements. If you've got a license, and you've maintained it active, and you've been doing it for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, you've met the requirements.
There's different rules. Different rules over there than here.
I know.
Well, you're here, you're taking.
Like, you have
That's
to
why
make
most
an
people
exam.
who are brokers somewhere else, if they're not really in a hurry to go open an office, they'll go the normal route.
But they cannot do anything without taking the test, right?
Nope. No ticket, no watching. What was the note on the board? Not even accounted for. You see that, right?
Yeah.
I hear you. You see it, right?
Yes, like that.
What's it say?
Not even in a candy bar.
That's worth 20 to 25 points on the state exam. Go talk to Bob Sullivan and the Boca Raton Century Village office. 30 years ago, I taught him his license. He says the one thing that I remember from everything in the class was not even a candy bar. If it Now, this requirement to be able to qualify for a broker. Now, we've already talked about all the other things, getting the license and then going through that process. Now we're up to the point where, we've made the educational requirement and license requirement. Now, if I want to go for the broker's license, I have to look at the experience requirement. If you go to page 30,
There's nothing on these pages prior to, we have to highlight, correct?
in about 2 seconds, there'll be one.
Okay.
On page 300, starting with line 11 through 30.
Bracket or highlight?
Bracket and the highlight,
11 to 30?
11 to 30.
On page
Page
30.
Well, actually, 13 to 30. The heading says broker experience requirements. The first thing is, has to be 2 years active. But it does not have to be in Florida. Does it have to be 2 consecutive years?
Are we highlighting them?
Yes,
From 13 to,
13 through 30.
okay.
Because you gotta put all that together to be able to answer the question. Because you realize they're gonna turn 1 or 2 words differently. There are times where you will get questions, and you'll see them on the practice quizzes, where all the answers are right. You may be asked to choose the best answer. So if they say which of the following best does whatever, you know there's gonna be at least 2 right answers, if not 4. But I don't have a choice of multiple choice. I have to pick one up. So which one do I pick? The one that best describes the way the questions work. Okay, I found the question. But we're not to it yet. We'll come back. Now, there's one disadvantage for working for a developer who is an owner, not a broker. Paragraph at the top of the next page. It's not a star, but you probably should put a bracket around it. Or it says the experience requirement, if you're working for another developer, doesn't count. Hmm? Top, the first paragraph, okay. Just put a bracket. No, highlight.
With a highlight?
No, it's not.
1 through 8.
Yeah, 1 through 8. But the main point in this paragraph is the fact that, playing off the previous page, is the fact that your time spent working for an owner developer who is not a broker does not count towards your experience requirements. You know, all this stuff where you talk about broker plus license, broker continuing education, we talked about that. Bottom of the page. You've got two terms there, registration and licensure. Here's what I'd like you to do. Let's put a bracket around line 23 and 24. What you're looking at is the definition of the term registration. On the top of 32. I'll put a bracket around lines 1 through 4. Right now, do you have registration?
Yeah.
From what they're talking about on the page, do I have registration?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I'm on record with them.
Yes.
Do I have licensure? When will I?
Pass the exam.
When you pass the state exam. Because at that point, you have now met all the requirements to request a license. That's why you can come right here afterwards, sign the papers. We register you with the department is working for one of our companies, and you're off and running. So you can, make your first listing appointment for 7 o'clock at night. You get 8 o'clock class, come here, fill out the paperwork, go to your listing appointment. Assume that's what you plan on doing. Is that a valid license? You have to trust his list. I got a yes. Are you sure?
That's right.
I got revoked yesterday. This license is prima facie evidence, not absolute truth. It says here, do not alter this document in any form. This is your license. Says, this is my license. So on the surface of this, it looks like I'm what? Current. Not much longer.
It says September.
September. Yeah, but we have to take a 4-hour class on teaching techniques. I should do real well in my class. I was just talking about that.
Yeah, it is the license, right?
Hmm?
It is.
Yeah,
It's current until September.
and this is the school license. Because the company has to have a license as well as the people within it. But because to use this business entity to offer real estate courses, you have to have a license to do that. This is not my broker's license. How you would tell somebody's license was a instructor's license, there's a Z in front of the number. Actually, it's ZH. But they talk about the term there of prima facie, simply in plain English meaning that on the surface it appears to be valid. But like I said, I got revoked yesterday. License still appears to be valid, but it's not.
Did you actually?
Hmm?
Did you actually?
I'm trying to avoid that. Now, starting at the bottom of page 32, where it says real estate services, I want to go with the bracket, the rest of that page, which is 9 through 12. And then I want to bracket the whole page on the next page, which is 33. And then you're gonna write either in the back, outside or down at the bottom. Or actually, let's do it on page 32. Because you got a big space there. In big letters, these two pages are extremely important.
But they're not highlighted.
But they're not highlighted.
It's not in the state.
The information here could have a bearing on other questions in other chapters. But no, the information specific is not a question on the class exam. If it would, that would be highlighted. First thing I have to learn is the gate services of real estate. Because you're gonna have scenario questions where somebody is performing a service. The first thing you may have to try to figure out is if one of the real estate services. And the third thing you have to figure out is that person qualified to do what they're doing. Qualification may be, I'm selling my own home. I don't think I need a license to do that. I gave you two terms the other night. I think we'll bring those two terms back into this discussion. One of the terms was brokering real estate. And the other term was buying and selling real estate. The next time after today, when I ask you what they mean, I expect everybody in the room to know the answer. Or down the road, there are several places where it can cost you points. The way we defined brokering real estate was to deal, or others, for compensation. What does buying and selling real estate mean? What's it mean? Your English teacher would have a stroke if you define something by using the same word. Like you really care.
Purchasing a property and turning it around and selling it.
You're doing it for yourself.
Right.
But the key is, in one situation, you're doing it for someone else and getting compensated. That, I think, requires a license. So, question. In a scenario where they have someone performing what would be one of the services of real estate, what's the first thing I need to look for? Are they telling me that the person is buying and selling real estate, or the person is
Brooklyn.
brokering? To broker means you're doing it for somebody else and they're paying you. A yacht broker, a stock broker. They're brokers just like us. They have a license because they're offering services to the public and being compensated. In a minute, you will see that the word compensation is very broad. The word commission and compensation are not synonyms.
No.
Commission is simply one form of compensation. Looking at the list of the services, I don't get this one. Why buy and sell? I got a line that says buy, and I got a line that says sell. Why the difference? Here's the reason for it. If they didn't use sell, and all they used is buy, if I was working with the buyer, I wouldn't need a license. By wording it this way, if I'm working for the if I'm working for the buyer, or I'm working for the seller, or I'm working for both of them, I'm performing one or more of the 8 services of real estate. But they had to have terms that covered both sides. If you just look at it from the buy side, you'll automatically have the sell side. I'd like to, it'd be nice to catch both ends of the deal. That doesn't always work. What's the difference between rent and lease? Oh, question. Are these terms nouns or verbs? Because that changes the meaning of those words. They're verbs. Because providing services is an activity, being active. That makes it a verb. I'm sorry that we're doing, English 101. Wait till we get to the math, and you have to do algebra. Fortunately, there is no calculus in there. That was a fun class. I was never so lost in my entire life. Okay, difference between rent and lease.
Leases are different, eventually being commercial.
Lease is temporary, it's a shorter contract.
Rent is for you and leasing is.
Who's you?
The renter, the person living there.
Yeah, the lessor and the.
You notice that you talk to me like you're somebody without a license? You're not talking about me, to me, as if you're performing those activities for somebody else. So what does renting mean?
Because renting is month-to-month lease,
No.
which requires a contract.
Rent would be the consideration.
It's not rent, it's not a noun, it's a verb.
It's offering the services.
If I work with the tenant, I'm helping them rent. If I work for the landlord, I'm helping them lease their property.
The lessor and leasing.
Yes, lessor, lessee. Because you can't think from the perspective of an agent. Therefore, what came out of my mouth didn't come out of yours. I'm reminded that I do that when I leave here too. It's okay in here, other places not doing it, yeah. It's not easy learning a new language. It takes a lot of practice. Some of you are starting to fade on me. It's okay, I have a class starting in April. Not a problem. Pay me now, pay me later. All right, that was fun. I would like you to start reading at line 1 and go all the way through line 19.
Page 33.
Yeah. Shouldn't say that. 33, yes. Starting with line 1 through 19. Okay, here we go. I am a real estate investor. I live next door to a gentleman that has a roofing business. Neither one of us have real estate licenses. We're talking one day, and the gentleman with my neighbor, who is the roof contractor, says that they want to sell the property, but they hate real estate agents. And he knew that I did a lot of investing, so he said, if you can get me $250 for the property, and we can close within the next 4 months, I'll put a new roof on your house. Okay, that's not a bad deal. Don't answer the question until the question is over. That's dangerous. So, I said, okay, no problem. I sold it for $300,000. We closed 42 days after the first buyer showed up. Told you I was good. But that schmuck never put my roof on. I couldn't say anything because I'm not sure if what we did was legal. So the question is, has the law been violated? 475. Actually, this one would be 455
$455.
because they're unlicensed. And if they violated the law, who violated the law? Now, everybody understands the scenario. So you might need to repeat it. Okay,
You violated.
let me do it again.
You violated the law.
I am a investor. I don't have a real estate license. My friend next door is in the roofing business and has a roofing company. He wants to sell his home. He doesn't want to work with an agent. He knows that I buy and sell a lot of real estate. And he solicited me to sell his home. He wanted to get $250. Wanted to close within 60 days. I was able to get him $300,000 and we closed in 42 days.
He didn't
He
listen
made
though,
no
right?
money.
He just turned the paper?
Now, the answer to my question is yes
Yes,
or no.
yes.
Now, you listen to me very carefully. You add anything to the question that's been asked of you and you just change the answer. What are your other choices? If you have to add that much to an answer for it to meet the question, it ain't right. How many of you say the law has been broken? How many of you say that the law was broken by the investor? How many of you say the law was violated by the roofer? How many of you says that the law was violated by both of them? What's your answer? No. Yeah. What answer?
No, I,
Investor, builder, or both?
both.
Investor?
Me, the roofer. Because he carries the business license.
Oh, you paying it out.
No, but he didn't pay
I thought you
anything.
said no one was,
Oh,
who was licensed.
For the
No,
the
he's not a
investor.
license, he's an
Investor,
investor.
because he was expecting something to pay, and he said that no, not even a kind.
Who's said, I didn't say anything about paying.
Nobody's allowed to engage in real estate services without being a licensed agent. Neither one of them had licenses to do that.
But it says for compensation.
Okay,
So
but
we know.
promised
wait,
compensation. It says
we-
right here, not even promise or hope for
Right.
that's
compensation.
the candy bar.
Because you understand that the issue here isn't whether it's one of the 8 services for real estate or not. It's definitely one of the 8 services for real estate. We have a sailor, a seller there. So it's definitely the 8 services for real estate.
However, the
What?
only person that can go after them is not FREC because neither one of them are licensed, so now you're in 455.
Correct.
Well, he didn't pay the compensation.
Does it
Do me a
not-
favor.
The word is
In this book, it
No. Mr. Michaelas, you be quiet. Go back and look at the definition of compensation. Do me a favor, if you wouldn't mind. Read it to me. Out loud. Starting with line 10.
Anyone who performs real estate services for another person for compensation of any type must be licensed.
Keep going.
Unless specifically exempt by law, compensation is defined as anything of value or of valuable consideration, directly, indirectly paid, promised or expected to be paid or received.
There you go.
Compensation includes money in the form of a salary, bonus, commissions, and gratuities.
Not even a candy bar.
Expected to be received.
not
Is the
even
operative-
promised.
Right, so my thinking is different.
The minute the law was violated, the minute the two of them agreed to that.
Yeah.
What happened after that point doesn't change the
The
violation.
minute he promises to put the roof on.
Yep.
So it was intent as well, not just the action.
It's
In other words,
expected.
he
No, there was a
intended-
promise.
It was a promise, okay, but the promise
you're an
wasn't
investor,
fulfilled.
It doesn't
was not a
matter.
written
He's
agreement.
expecting it to be fulfilled.
There's a book, been around for thousands of years, talks about that same concept. You have already been guilty if you think about it. You'd be real surprised where a lot of the laws come from.
See, the investor wasn't shrewd. Had he been shrewd, he would have bought the property directly from the roofer for $250 and
Turn
then
around
sold
and sold
it
it.
for, that is what he should have
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. But that would not be the question.
I understand that, we're between law and reality.
No? Between you passing the desk, or failing. See, my questions and scenarios are not random. Your questions are. So for the most part, I'm not interested. I answer to be nice. And then sometimes I don't feel like being nice. Like an agent, you have to look at it through FREC's eyes. If you do that, you'll make the right interpretation. And if you don't learn the vocabulary, you're gonna be up shit creek with that battle. See, if you didn't realize and read all the way through the definition of compensation, you wouldn't have seen that word promise. That word promise should have said, that's it. I don't give a shit what the rest of the question says. They've already violated the law just by the promise. And the payor is as guilty as the payee. Line 16 to 19. Still on 333. 333, 30.
Wait, what is it, I'm sorry?
I just want to look at line 16 to 19. Can I pay referral fees to someone who's not licensed for sending me business?
No.
No.
I can't?
No,
No.
not even 10 to
Okay. How about this? When my daughter sold her home, she doesn't have a license, and neither does her husband. We gave them our portion of the commission to help them with the house. When they bought the new house, did the same thing. Is that illegal?
No.
Are you
I mean,
giving, are you
everybody look
giving,
at me. How many of you say that's illegal?
are you giving them a portion of the commission or a
Yeah,
gift? Or a
portion of the
gift?
commission.
It's, you said this is a portion of the commission.
Yes,
That you can't do?
can do. 61J2, 0.29, paragraph 2, says that parties to the transaction can be given a part of the commission, which can be all the commission, provided there's full disclosure. If you'd like to look it up to make sure, you're more than welcome. And the question was in that 4 lines that I told you to take a look at. Apparently, it took too long to look. Question. 2 weeks after my daughter bought her new home, a friend of hers said that they're selling their home. And obviously, my daughter referred us to that person. We took the listing, we sold the property, we made a nice commission. Can I pay her?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
Because she's
Licensed.
Not because she's unlicensed, that's the wrong answer.
Because it's a referral.
No, it's not that it's a referral. She was not a party to the transaction. Which means now she falls under brokering real estate. If she's the buyer or seller, not brokering real estate. So what it really means is, I was giving them their own money. Because if you sell your house and you make a profit, you pay 6% of what you sold it for a commission. So out of your own money, you pay the 6% commission. Well, what if I turn around and give it back to you?
That's what's permissible, okay.
Why? She's a party to the transaction, I just basically gave her back her own money.
Could you, where is it stated, you know, where, that the daughter in the first case, you can, the agent can give them back the money or piece? In where?
Under the rules of the Florida Real Estate Commission, 61J2,
Okay, it's not here, it's just,
no,
okay,
it's,
okay. I'm looking here in the book.
because I can't tell you the number of times that I've been asked that answer. When I first started, the 475 was in a little blue book, but that big.
So what's operative is if somebody is a party to the transaction, then they.
Because the way I always remembered it is I'm giving them their own money. They're not brokering. They are buying or selling.
He's basically just abdicating his commission. Just.
I
I'm
understand,
not
but
taking
that's
it.
the key is they are a party to the transaction.
And then disclose.
And that's the wording you find in that rule. Yeah, absolutely, that's the key. They're a party to the transaction. Because if the next week she referred 10 of our friends and we made $4 million worth of commission, we couldn't give them a dime.
Put your mindset, maybe just word it different.
But that's dirty, because,
If you want to see this.
I'm working with the client.
Who are you?
Doing this correct, he's saying, yeah,
Who are you?
the state is above for the past.
Huh?
I'm working with a client.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Are you an agent?
I'm an agent.
Okay.
And I'm working with a client, and I showed him the house and everything, we're ready to close, and all of a sudden, he happens to be related to another agent, that, I said, okay, I split the commission.
Well, like you said, it's their money.
Instead of getting the 6%, I give you, you can keep 3%. Then,
Okay.
I did all the
That was a buyer? You talked about you working with a buyer?
either selling or buying.
Well,
Well, you wouldn't have sell, it wouldn't, that's more of a buying situation.
Okay, buying.
See, what she's saying is, she spent the last month driving these fools around, and all of a sudden, mom shows up out of Miami with a real estate license, and she's gonna write the contract.
And she's willing to split half or with them.
Right. That's why you have buyer brokers agreements. I find it interesting. Real estate agents are extremely hesitant to use the buyer brokers agreement. They'll work with a buyer for days, for weeks, for months, with no protection. Would you take a verbal listing?
It's an open listing, isn't it?
I don't care what you call it. My question is, would you take a verbal listing?
No.
Why not? I'm not guaranteeing anything. So, in my mind, just turn my hat around, it's the same answer. But the buyer brokerage agreement is a different animal. You're not gonna get them to sign a 6-month exclusive right of sale like you would now. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get down the road.
Excuse me, Dale. Is, to remember real estate services, obviously will be on the exam in that particular order, 8-4.
Not necessarily in that particular order, that's just a way of remembering it.
Okay,
The order is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
but this is pertinent to the exam.
Someone is charged with violating 475. Is the burden on the state or on the person to show that they didn't violate the law?
The person.
That's the last paragraph on the page.
Burden of proof.
See, where I can see this as a problem, I'm the general of the condominium association. I'm one of the owners. I know everybody. Nothing happens here without my approval. I think we're still in New York. Only some people get that. And they work deals. And they get paid $500, $1,000. It's a very common practice. But the problem was there was no statute, no rule prohibiting it. they didn't fall under 475 because they didn't, somebody said before, because they didn't have a license. See, FREC deals with applicants and licensees. And somebody else said, if it's unlicensed activity, it's the department I've got to go to. That paragraph is relatively new. Because I think eventually FREC and the powers to be realized that there was way too much unlicensed activity out there, putting the public in jeopardy. When that happens, mom will swoop down. It doesn't say the amount, the number, it's a third degree felony, I think it's 5,000, 5 years. Per offense. Glad. I'm clowns, screw up my profession. Question on this page. Do you realize how many scenarios can come out of this? You'll notice that most of my questions are scenarios. There'll be less of those when we get into the principles of practice as part of it. But in the law, it's activities that are valid, legal or illegal. And that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out when I read scenarios, which way we're going with this. Okay. Now, in order to be compensated for performing real estate activities, I need a real estate license. Right?
Yes.
That's law. Now, why do they create laws? Now, the answer it should have given is to protect the public. My answer is so they can create exemptions. Next 2 pages. You got all these shit, anything you do that's any of the 8 service real estate, you have to have a license to be compensated, and then they give you 2 pages of exemptions.
That's what I want to hear.
Right, a little hint. If they're getting paid per transaction or they're getting paid a commission, they need a license. I don't care what the scenario is. Because you'll see most of these are salaries.
Key is gonna be transaction versus salary.
So what if I'm getting a salary plus an extra $100 per transaction?
No.
No,
The salary part is okay.
that is,
It's the extra $100 because you're getting paid per transaction.
interesting question.
Yes.
What if you're a salaried employee and you're told, if there's so many transactions in a month, we'll give you a bonus. You get a $100 bonus for if there's 5 transactions. That's not necessarily per transaction, is it?
But it's based on performance. And that's what they get.
Performance. What did you actually do?
All right. It says here, a person who performs real estate services more than other, I'm on page 34, must be licensed unless specifically exempted by law. The Florida statutes identify specific exemptions from the requirement to be licensed as a real estate broker or sales associate. The exemptions have been organized into 5 groups for study purposes. Owner exemption, exemptions based on career, like an attorney, salary employees, court or legally appointed persons. If the court appoints you, they can pay you whatever they deem appropriate. FREC has nothing to say about it. Then, we don't know where to put the rest of them, so we'll just put them in miscellaneous. The first one, but bracket these 2 pages, no star, no highlight. It's like the other 2 pages, it's very important. Why? It's almost always a source of at least a couple questions on the state exam. Because I do think they want to see that you have a basic concept of when you have to have a license and when you don't. And if you don't have a license, what things can I do that would allow me to make money but wouldn't put me in violation of the license law? The first one says, property owners who buy, sell, or exchange or lease their own property. If I'm doing it for myself, the second one says, officers, directors of corporations may buy, sell, and exchange and lease the property for the business entity. The one that probably would more likely be the question that you might get is the third bullet.
The one that starts an attorney in fact.
Partners.
Oh, okay.
Anybody that has not yet signed the attendance. Good idea to make sure you don't forget to do that. Mom had rules about that. And not screw up curfew. Question, you have 3 friends who decide they want to invest in real estate as a group. So they all agree to take equal shares, which would be 33 1/3, I believe. They decide that there's a property that they own, that the values in that area have gone up so much, they want to cash out. It happens to be in an area where one of the 3 is closer. So everybody agrees that gentleman 3 is going to handle this transaction. He does a great job, they make a great profit. So they decide they're going to give him 50% of the profit, and they'll split the other 50. Is that legal?
Yeah.
No,
No, it's not legal.
No.
he can only get his
Yes.
proportional share of what,
Because
his
the minute
investment.
you get more money than is equal to the shares you are ownership of, you are now being compensated for real estate service.
But it's theirs.
It says right
If he got 50%, he got more than he owned. Which means they are now compensating him for a real estate transaction.
Fair enough.
they can go ahead and do it 33, and then after they get it, they give back to him.
No, they can't. The only way he could get more is if he has a license.
You
That's the way I
just,
said it.
you just blew, break. You must go to the board and write, I will never think stupid things like that ever again in my life.
I'm sorry.
Obviously, the point there is, if I have 30% ownership, that's how much of the profit I'm entitled to, because that's my money.
That's all.
They give me any of their money,
Consider compensation, you're in violation.
now I'm getting compensation that requires a
Unless you have a
license.
real estate license.
Very simple.
You can't get anything extra for where you work.
And the next one talks about owners of timeshare. Well, of course they can sell. Not that anybody's gonna want to buy it. And then it says based on career. And we've got attorneys at law. They're exempt when they do attorney things in a real estate transaction, like they do the title work, or they draw off the contracts. Those are all lawyer things. They can be compensated for that based upon whatever their compensation scale is. The only tie here is it happens to be they're doing their lawyer thing in a real estate transaction. But that does not mean that attorneys can refer business to you and expect to get compensated. In some states, that is allowed. By being a current active member of the bar, you are recognized, or you can be compensated as if you had a broker's license. That does not exist in Florida. The second one is the CPA. In commercial deals, I'm looking at a $20 million office building. I'm gonna send my CPAs in there to do what? Tear those books apart. To make sure they haven't been what? What's the term? Cooked. Now, a CPA is now involved in a real estate transaction, is being compensated for his or her work in that transaction. But again, it's the same mentality as the attorney. They have a license to do the activities they're doing. The fact that they're doing it within a real estate transaction doesn't put them in violation of statute. Tell you what, when we stop right here, oh no, let me do one more. The third bullet. I'm on line 33. Why are they telling me that appraisers are exempt?
They're under this thing.
Because they're not licensed under the part of 475 that we are part of. Part 1 is us. Brokers, broker associates, sales associates, instructors, real estate school, corporations, LLCs that are brokering real estate. Their regulation is 7. they were able to break 475 into chunks to be able to get the appraisers being licensed separately. Like I said, before this all came along, if you wanted to be an attorney, an appraiser, you had to be a broker first. Now one has nothing to do with the other. Hello? Hey, buddy. Yes? Okay. Will do. Okay, no problem. Interesting with the bosses, for sure. Are appraisers performing one of the 8 services real estate?
Yes,
Why?
you have to appraise them.
Because appraising is on the list
Yes.
of the 8 services for real estate. So why don't they have to have a real estate license?
They're just
Because they-
performing service.
Because federal law required the states to separate the licensing of real estate agents and appraisers. FREC figured out a way of doing it by taking off a chunk of 475. So we actually were talking about 475-1, part 1. That one statement there is talking about part 2. So all the discussions we had about sales associates and broker associates, and all that stuff comes from part 1. All right. Great. See you in 25.
25 seconds.
These are highlighted areas. Could I have the one highlighted, Monday?
Brackets are different from the highlighted. I think it's up to page 26 is what.
When there's a start, and that's.
Well, that might just be my
Oh,
notation.
okay.
You know, some of it is not, the brackets are as for the teacher. And the star is just my indication to go over the material. And, that's what I highlighted, so.
Thank you.
He's only supposed, is he over at 9 usually? Is he supposed to end at 9?
I think it's $3.5 per class.
$3.5?
That's what they really said last time. I heard. Yeah, I think it was like 20 minutes ago. We'll get this shit done.
wheels and any.
Yeah, they're flashcards, I didn't even notice them.
On the back?
Yeah. That's a good idea.
In the back of the yellow one?
No, the,
Oh, the yellow one.
They're rad.
we have a practice.
I saw them all the time. When I was at, I was right there at the gas station, I was like, raspberry. You remember the Altoid sours they used to do? I'm like, bring those back. I remember those. Remember they were like mandarin orange, pear, mango, they were really weird, they were so different. But I would get big, so I can't have gum, so I don't need the permits. Have you joined the class?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. He is.
How about yourself?
Yeah, it's different. He's very.
You're busting me out.
Oh, he's out looking, so it's like all flights at home. My What about you? Are you from here originally? Wow.
I've been down for a while.
Yeah? Don't miss the cold, do you? I don't.
I actually do a little bit. I miss the winter.
What is it in New Jersey? What is New Jersey?
Hoboken? Hudson County? You from New Jersey? Englewood. Oh, neighbors.
Neighbors.
Long time,
A long time.
7 years on Florida.
Oh, okay, I've been down here since about 8 years now.
Oh.
So you're from?
New Jersey.
Me too.
Where?
I grew up a little bit in Newark and then I moved to Kearney.
Newark. Okay, I'm from Hoboken.
Yeah.
Bayonne, Jersey City.
Yeah, I'm like closer because I'm in Kearney, so.
Yeah, I know Cardi.
Yeah, my husband's from Paris. Yeah.
The soccer stadium's over there, the Red Bull.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's pretty nice
The
though.
train station.
Mhm.
Nice. How long have you been down here?
14 years,
Oh, you're Floridian.
I guess, yeah. Yeah, I miss the snow in the winter time. I lived in Michigan for like 5 years, so I miss like the snow at like Christmas time. But then it's all like slush and pushed around.
It's fine. But you can't be Florida with it.
You know, I just wish it would make up its mind, but.
Absolutely. Confused.
Michigan will do that too. This week there it was like negative 20 at the beginning of the week, now it's like 45. It's like,
That whole global warming.
oh, I know, it's like a big 60 degrees swing.
It's like after Chicago.
Yeah. In the downtown, like I've been down there, and like you can hear the wind like all through the buildings. It's like, oh, me. Especially if you're there like at night and you're out and about, you hear the wind howl, you're like, oh.
How long have you been in the banking industry?
Little over a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's.
Is it fun?
Oh yeah, because you meet, I work in the downtown district, so I rub elbows with like city commissioners and real estate agents all day long. So it's like, you know, it's all kind of talk shop with them when they're there, kind of like pick their brain and everything. So they're like, hey, whatever you get, can you call, you know? So it's a good connection. But like if I want to be on the other side and be like a banker and help people open accounts, close accounts, I can't be an active real estate agent because it's a conflict of interest. So I'm like, this is interesting. It's all about finding a balance.
Of course.
What about you? What do you do?
I'm sure. Country club.
Nice. Which one?
Vocal West Country Club.
Okay, Boca West. I know Boca West. Yeah.
Ben is actually a member of that.
Oh, how funny. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of agents that are members, and some of the employees as well there.
Nice. Yeah, I only found out about the class because the realtor I bought my house, Sam, she just got a house in. When I bought my house back in like August, like July, August, September, it was right before she got pregnant. She was telling me, huh? Yeah, yeah, well, thank you. And, I've known her for 5 years, and she's had her own broker, affordable realty. She's like, you're so be a realtor. She goes, you're crazy enough to sit there. And I was like, okay. And she told me about herself, and she was like, pregnant with something, kind of a younger guy, younger than her.
Break
And I'm
can't
like,
be about
really?
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just give me the break can't be about 10 minutes.
And he goes, she kind of has a lot of energy, kind of runs around. I'm like a chihuahua? She goes, yeah, I'm like a chihuahua. So, he is. But he has a lot of energy.
Oh, yeah.
New York.
Didn't have what she was saying. She's, you know, kind of partner. She's had her own brokerage.
Grew up right on Long Island. And then eventually
And she told me
to
she
the
was
city.
come to the class, come meet him.
So
I'm
now,
like, okay,
back to
okay.
Long Island, raise the
Kept
kids.
mixing up, I had kids, I'm sick and all that.
Back to the city.
I went to just this last one, it was like,
What town?
told me about you, I was like, oh crap.
Rosslyn Heights.
Yeah, really nice, I'm sure.
Okay, let's continue. Item 34.
So, yeah, from the city. Yeah. Is that right?
We've already talked about the first bullet. I know that I can go to work for an owner developer on a salary basis
Just a couple months.
without a license. I can't get paid per transaction. I can't get bonuses. What if I'm working for an owner developer and, they said, I tell you what, you've done such a good job this year. I have 3 lots. Pick one of them.
No. Compensation.
He can only get a salary, right?
That's what it says.
Because that would be a transaction, right?
Look at what's in parentheses. It says the employees may not receive fee, commission, or other compensation based on the transaction. Now, if I just said, I love you, you're my son, here's a lot.
Isn't that considered a gift?
Yeah, but a gift could be a form of compensation.
Yes.
But
You can
if
give-
all he does is have a quick claim deed drawn up and signed, that would be it. Would be no need for the license. If he tied that, if he had said, okay, son, here's the deal. You wanted that lake, front property on the cul-de-sac. I'll reserve it for you, but you have to close 10 transactions by June the 30th. By the end of April, I've closed 6. And he deeds the property over to me. Is that a violation? Yes, because it was based on transaction. I am a leasing agent on site for one of these big apartment complexes. I am renting to these tenants, I'm leasing for the landlord, and I'm working for the landlord. Based upon what I told you, you need a license.
No.
No,
Why?
you're a salaried employee.
Okay, that was the second bullet. The third bullet, I am a property manager for a condominium association. Do I need a real estate license to do that? The answer is no, I need the CAM
CAM
license to do that. But how about this? What if, as a part of my duties, I rent out units for the snowbirds in the complex? As a part of my salary? Would I need a real estate license?
No.
No.
Nope.
Based on the information right now, no.
No. I need the CAM license to do the managing. But I'm doing the rental stuff for the owners, actually through the association. Who don't have to have a license.
Now, does that change if it's 10 units or $100,000?
If I don't need the CAM license, then I can work for them as an employee without a CAM license. Odds are they probably wouldn't need people of you less than 10, unless you're managing a whole bunch of them. The fourth one actually, a owner developer. I think we beat that one to death. The next one is court of legally appointed persons. Court appointed. Judge makes me the personal representative of an estate. One of my duties is to dispose of the 2 properties owned by the estate. Can I be compensated for that? Yep,
Yes, you can.
because it's coming through the courts.
So they're appointing you, that's why.
Because you're providing the service dictated by the courts. And then the attorney in fact. What's the difference between attorney at law and attorney at, excuse me, in fact? One of them went to law school.
Yeah. Work
Well, one of them passed the bar. Both could have gone to law school.
The other is assigned. You know, the authorization,
Power of attorney.
POA.
That's another piece of paper that I would need to put in the file. You tell me you have the power of attorney to sign for your mother, let's see it. And then I'm gonna send it over to the title company, just to make sure everything's kosher. And I'm gonna do that as I'm taking the listing, not 20 days before closing, when the title company picks it up in the title search. You play a very important role early on in a transaction. Because right off the bat, you have to figure out who the owner is. This deal. This is it. Get that. Now, miscellaneous, because we didn't really have any place to put them. The first one, I work at a mobile home park or recreational park. I don't have to have a license. So my question is, I'm working for this recreational park. They lease out spaces for snowbirds, but they also have a certain number of units that they will sell. And the employee does both. Is that okay?
Yep.
As long as he's salaried.
No, it is.
Takes an effort.
As long as you get nothing based on transaction.
It says rent, it doesn't say sell. It says rent, it doesn't say sell. And if you went to 475 and looked up the definition in the first section of 475 for real estate or real property, renting of a mobile home lot is not considered to be real estate. But selling the lots are. Why? Because mom decided to do it that way. The next one, I don't know why I want this job. Persons who sell cemetery lots. You want to know why? It's a dead issue.
Oh, man.
No, cemetery lots are not considered real property. Again, if you went to the definition of 475, it specifically excludes cemetery lots. Are there regulation of that industry? Of course, but not under 475. The next one says dealers who are registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission because they have a securities license. Business brokers, a lot of times will wind up with both the real estate broker and the stockbroker license. Why? Because they sell in a big company. Not only are they selling the physical, they're also selling the intangibles like the stocks. Real estate license won't let me get paid for that. I have to have a securities license. The next one is hotel or motel clerk to rent transient occupancy of public lodging establishments. That's what killed me. So, if I'm renting out rooms in a hotel or motel, by the hour, by the day, by the week, whatever's appropriate to the activity, am I regulated?
Not by friends.
Yes, not by 475. Here is the problem. Under the statute, I think it's 525, but don't hold it to me, that deals with the hotel, motel, restaurant businesses, has different rules in regard to what a clerk who is renting out rooms can do. 475 would have made them have a license.
Yeah.
Under that law, they don't have to have a license. So we had a conflict. When that happens, they have to make a decision. Which law are they going to use to regulate that person? Well, given the nature of it, it made more sense to go to, I think it's 425 or 435, which is the restaurant and lodging, than to put it in real estate. So how did they get it out of real estate? They made the activity exempt from 475. So if I'm looking into what kind of regulation there are for a hotel motel because I don't like the way I was treated, going to 475 would do you no good. Because 475 does not deal with those. And then the last one. I'm in an apartment complex. I refer a tenant. Tenant moves in, pays the first rent, I get a $50 check. Could the landlord say, listen, guys, I need to fill this place up? Speaking to the tenants. I'll give you a half a month's rent for every person that you bring in the next month.
That's illegal.
That's illegal.
Why?
The maximum you can give is 50, right?
Depends on what the rent is.
No,
It's 50 bucks.
It's because it's over 50 bucks.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit what the rent is. Less than 50 bucks.
The rent is 40 bucks or something.
Yeah.
You're like,
It'd be in a hole with it. That probably wouldn't work. Again, at the bottom of 8 to make reference to that CAM license. Okay. That was fun. Let's go to page 41 for a second. Now, I don't want you to say that you can make it on a spec paper or notepad or whatever. I want you to read and answer question 16 on 41. I want you to write down this question. No, sorry. I want you to write down the answer to this question, not that one. But actually it is about that. When I look at question 16, how many of those answers are correct? No. Write it down. That does not require the mouth. Unless you write it with the mouth. Okay, everybody ready? All right, here we go. I want to know how many of those answers are correct. How many of you say 1? How many of you say 2? How many of you say 3? How many of you say 4? You are right. There are 4 correct answers. The question says, which statement best describes? And put it in big letters. Answer A is good answer. Answer B is a little better. Answer C is a little better. Answer D is perfect. So don't be surprised if you have 4 right answers. You'll know it because they'll do something like that. They say but, or they say best. See, they tell me which the following answer is, best describes. I'm not gonna be shocked that I got 4 answers that could be right. Yes,
I have a difficulty with, A, you said there are 4 answers, and we agreed upon that. But technically, it says there is no violation. Even though he purchased the property as the owner.
wait, I'm sorry, which one are you on?
I'm on question, I'm sorry,
19?
19, correct, yes.
Okay.
And it says, one of the answers, which statement applies to the arrangement? A, there is no violation of FS 475.
Right. Go ahead.
All right, so that's my question. So even though he's a family member, his father purchased the property, requested the son to sell it.
Let me ask a question. Was his son a son, or was he an employee?
Well, that's the gray area.
No, it's not. It
He's an
says he
employee.
hired his son. You don't hire someone to be your son. You hire your son to be an employee. Well, maybe you do. But if I'm hiring my son, I'm paying him. I don't know how long he winds up working, but that's another story.
It seems like this kid lasted a couple weeks and left, so.
To me, the real question is, who violated the law? The answer to the question is on both of them. You already know the answer to that question. You don't need to look down. I told you payor is as guilty as the payee, but I guess you decided to ignore me giving you answers on the test. I told you random, the questions I give you and the answers and the statements I made are not random. It just seemed that way. Why? Because sometimes they just pop in my head. And before they get lost at 67, I get them out.
You're a young man.
Not after that.
That's good, thanks.
Now, don't always count on the answer that's the longest being the best. In this case, I love this one to illustrate the fact that all 4 answers could be right. Also, never stop at the first right answer. I've had people mark A. Never even looked at B, C, and D. Which obviously is, it's the word, stupid. Okay, let's go chapter 3. Oh, we're in good shape, we still got 2 hours.
Did he say which was his best answer? Did he say which was his best answer?
You want 19.
And 16, did he say was the best? He says which best describes this, well, correct, which is the one he thinks.
Correct. D is the best.
Is the most complete answer.
Are we still mulling over that question 16? That's cool, I don't have a problem with that. If you got a question about it, ask it. Number 1, the son was an employee because he was hired. So this wasn't a gift from dad. This was compensation tied to performance. All right. When we first started the other night, I talked about the department and the Florida Real Estate Commission. Didn't say much about the division of real estate. When I started, I guess it was probably a year or 2 after, right after I got into this business. When I got in, there were 4 members of the commission, all brokers. and there was no limitation on the front. They were located in Orlando, and still are. And they were in control of regulating the real estate industry. Now, in Florida, we have something called the Sunshine Law Reviews, where periodically they look at statutes to see if they need to be brought into the 21st century. Well, in the late 70s, they made that decision. Today, we have 2 consumer members, 1 or none sales associate, and at least 4 brokers, as you will see in a little bit when we look at the list. The Department of Business and Professional Regulation, if we looked at the structure of the state, who or what would be above the department?
The executive branch?
The governor. Because any state department is directly tied to the governor. Now, underneath of the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, if you go into the website, you'll see all of them. I think it's 33 of them. Different businesses and professions. Obviously, we're focusing on one of them. Probably in excess, probably close to 350,000 real estate licenses, which includes inactive people and corporations and partnerships and all those things. So, let's see. I think 50,000 would hit Dade, Brown, and Palm Beach. New people come in all the time. I watch the bus turbulence for the first couple of years, and all of a sudden, the wheels start to turn. Oh, I'm sorry, those are the ones that came to training, not the ones who thought they knew everything and they don't need training. All the people that have gone through our training program, who have come to the classes at least 2 to 4 times, are all making 6 figures. I had to jump on, well, you met him. Dennis was there the other night. That guy got on the train and took the train up and then the bus to Hayden Ranch Road and Atlantic to come to training, because he felt that the education was critical. You know, I could give you a bunch of others. Then there's that handful that seem to have been anointed. And it doesn't make a shit what they do. They always make money. And when I figure that out, I'm a bottle it and stuff it. But is this a difficult business? Give me an example of a business that's not difficult. If you're making any kind of money, you're working your, well, unless you want to talk about drugs. Not a hard business, it's just damn dangerous. Don't laugh, Florida's a perfect place to smuggle. 2/3 of the state touch water. And yeah, you ought to take a little fly over the Everglades. You'll see a lot of landing strips out there. And had a guy in class that worked for the blimp. You know, they used to use it for surveillance. They would put it up in the clouds, and when they were bring the trucks in, they come in on the big ships. And speedboats would come in and load up and go back in. Well, if it's cloudy, you don't know the blip is up there. When the blips are all, the boats starting to come out to the ship, they'd radio in and out would come the DEA with their speedboats. And the speedboats would turn and go back in. And they actually was able to get up, one time he said, we got on their frequency. And they were all yelling, screaming, and cursing. How the hell do they know we're doing it? Every time we go out, they come running out after us. They never realized, he said, they never realized that night. Why? Because there was a bird in the sky. Interesting things happen in Florida. And there are a ton of little airports in Florida. It's phenomenal. I mean, if you actually look at the map where they show the different airstrips, there is a ton of them. All right, bottom of page 43. Starting with line 14, where it says the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, let's put a bracket from 14 to 21. On the top of the next page, there is a process they have to go through to regulate a profession or business. There are three basic things that have to exist in order for the legislature can be comfortable enough to create a new statute. It says unrated patches can hurt the public. The second one says the public is not adequately protected. What's the repeating word here?
Public.
And the third one says
Less restricted.
there's not a less restrictive. One example of that right there, business brokers. When I first started, business brokers had an occupational license, which they call the business tax license now. They basically were unregulated. But they were doing a lot of things that would normally have required a real estate license. So, by their actions, they showed the state that they were potentially harmful to the public. And there was a law existing that would adequately regulate the industry and protect the public, and that was real estate. So you know how they made business brokers or business enterprises or opportunities real estate? They went in and changed the definition to say that real estate includes business enterprises and business opportunities. So by a stroke of a pen, the business brokerage industry became a real estate activity. So there's no such thing as business brokers. They are real estate brokers who specialize in the sale and purchase of businesses. Most real estate agents are in residential. I would say this company would be considered more residential than it would anything else. What kind of license does a residential broker have? What kind of broker's license?
Real estate, right?
Real estate.
A real estate broker's license. What kind of license does a business broker have?
Real estate.
Real estate broker's license.
So a commercial broker doesn't have a commercial broker's license. A commercial broker tells you they have a real estate license and their specialty is commercial. That's why a majority of real estate agents would probably refer to themselves as residential brokers. Underneath those 3 bullets, lines 9 through 17 bracket. On page 44, starting with line 9 through 19, bracket. No highlight.
No highlight. 17 or 19?
15, 9,
9 to 17.
9,
to 19.
19.
Oh, 19.
Notice the first thing they do is tie the department to the governor's office.
Yeah.
And notice they bring up that 455. Because 455 is where they get their authority to operate. What gives FREC the authority to do their job? 475. Who is the head of the department? Who's the head of every state department? Right up to the federal level?
Like the
The
super.
secretary. Secretary of Education. Secretary of State. What department is the Secretary of State the head of?
Department of the Interior?
The State Department.
DMV.
Secretary of
Or
State
the
is the
collector,
State
right?
Department.
Okay, what was the question?
What department is the Secretary of State the head of? The
Right.
State Department.
Thank you. That's like if it was a snake, you'd be dead. How do I become the secretary of the department?
Appointed by the governor.
Appointed by who?
The governor.
Nobody else?
And confirmed by the legislature.
Well, that would make sense. If the department is underneath the governor, it would make sense that the governor would be appointing secretary. And you'll notice that the department, like most other departments, is located where? Tallahassee. And you see the structure there. You realize that this organizational chart is just for the Secretary, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So imagine what that thing looks like when you have to have a table the size of this room.
Do we need to memorize that flow chart?
Every bit of it. No, thank God. I don't see the Florida Real Estate Commission there anymore. This
Right,
is
it'll be the
division
third
of real
line.
estate.
Yeah.
This is the third column in the bottom.
Is the division of real estate,
Real estate boxing commission.
Florida State Boxing Commission, isn't that correct?
No.
Although real estate deals
They
sometimes.
just didn't break the flow chart up any further than that. And division of
I'll show you why in a minute. But notice the division of real estate's there,
real. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, they just didn't really.
but no FREC.
Right, FREC, including FREC and not little box.
Nope, they are not.
They're not?
I'll show you in a minute. Over on page 45, bracket, lines 27 through 38. What's the function of the division?
perform administrative duties?
Administrative duties. Here's why. When they made all that change I talked about in the late 70s, early 80s, they took FREC's staff away.
They took
So
FREC's
when
what
you
away?
say-
They took FREC's what away?
Staff away.
Okay.
So when you say Florida Real Estate Commission, you're talking about 7 people. Wait a minute. But if I call Orlando, somebody answers. So here's the question, before you answer that. Is the division, which is the administrative staff of the commission, located in Orlando or Tallahassee?
Orlando.
The division would be in Orlando.
Division?
Let me ask a different question. If you had your business located in Orlando, where would you want your staff? Orlando, where you're operating from, or Tallahassee? For those of you that are not sure, obviously you have run a business. Or you stayed as far away from it as you possibly can unless you absolutely have to go there. So when the phone is answered in Orlando, I don't think it's a member of the commission. It is someone who works for the Division of Real Estate under the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. That's the relationship between FREC, the division, and the department. Who's the ultimate overseer of the regulation of real estate? The department. Who sets the rules
State.
and
The state.
disciplines licensees?
Right.
Right. Hmm? I'm getting there. Now, FREC is not in that chart over there. Because FREC, I'll show you why it's not in that chart. Well, it is. I'll show you where FREC technically would be. Looking at 44. Draw a line from where it says the governor of Florida, straight out, and put FREC on page 44. Well, the chart is at the bottom of the page. The second box coming down says the governor of Florida. To the left of it, draw a line up to the left of it a little bit and put FREC. Now, you understand why I had to do that in a second. So if you go to where it says the governor of Florida in the chart, you go to the left side of that and draw a line straight up. And put FREC on the line. And turn to page 46. Let's put a bracket from lines 1 through 21. And you notice, what's FREC's objective? Protect the public. They don't give a shit whether you make money or not. They're not there to make sure you make money. They're there to make sure that while in your attempt to make money, you do not put the public in jeopardy. They don't care if you make nothing or make zillions of dollars. Care less. How you go about doing it and how you treat the public is what they're concerned about. So if I don't get paid, FREC is not a place to go. Ultimately, if I don't get paid, where would I wind up? Court. And if you're suing the company, you probably want to look for another job. Now, the second paragraph, it says composition and qualifications. And the pictures on the page are what out of date. How many members of the commission have to be licensed? 5. How many of them have to be sales associates? 0. Because it says what?
It says one. Says one.
Yeah.
What are the consumer members there for? To represent? Thank you. Now, I qualify for the last bullet. A lot of you do not. They're saying there has to be at least one member, 60 or older. Now, if you have to think about that, remember where you are. Remember what group of people are the largest voters in this state. I think you probably can move it up a little bit and still be within it. So, the largest contingency, I probably want representation. Why? Because those 62-year-old people get ripped off by real estate agents. So it makes sense to have at least one member that comes from that mentality. Because we're not talking about a handful of people this person represents. We're talking about probably 1 million. It's dropped a whole lot. My first FREC1 class, the average age probably right around 50. We won't talk about the ethnic mix. That's something else that has amazingly changed over the years. Now, I told you to draw that line out and put FREC. If you put a bracket around lines 1 through 11 on page 47, the next page, you'll see why. On page 47, starting with line 1, bracket down to line 11. How do I become a member? How do I become a member of the Florida Real Estate Commission? If you can't find it, go to the top of 47 and start line 2.
To go.
That's why I put them where they did.
Makes sense.
It also tells you the clout that FREC has. It also tells you it's probably one, if not the largest licensing agency in the state. So who does FREC work closely with? The department or the division?
The division.
The division. Does FREC within the division have attorneys to assist them? Not just. I noticed, not the last instructor seminar, but the one before that, everybody on the stage who was working for them, because it was on kind of an open session, ask your questions. There were 10 people on the stage. 9 of them were attorneys. Must be a pretty decent job. So, I guess I might need to have a little bit of an attorney's perspective. Since the people that are regulating me, the majority of them are attorneys. And do you not think that FREC will turn to them for guidance, for opinions, when they're dealing with a situation where somebody maybe has violated the law? Because the last thing you want to do is to have you be able to go to court and appeal and win. The likelihood of you getting FREC or getting the courts to reverse FREC's decision is probably pretty close to this number. Unless there was some procedural thing that was done incorrectly. Most time they will not kick it back. Now, we said that the Florida Real Estate Commission gets its authority from 475. Question is, what type of authority do they have? This starts at the bottom of the page. What says Commission's general powers and duties? bracket starting with 21 to the bottom of the page. On line 24, I want you to highlight, no, I want you to put a bracket around lines 24 and 25. Where it says executive power to regulate and enforce the law are delegated to the commission by the legislature. On the next page is their second power. Let's put a bracket around lines 5 through 7 where it defines quasi-legislative. And on lines 17 and 18, I want you to highlight line 17 to 18 where it says quasi-judicial responsibilities. Which of the three powers gives them the authority to operate? Executive, quasi-alleged, or quasi-judicial?
Judicial.
The power that gives them the authority to do their job, you should know, because the president has been talking about using it. No, executive power. You've heard it 1,000 times on the television. Why? That's a power that he can use to override everybody else. How well that'll go over is another story. And I have no further comment.
Huh? Please.
No, you don't. In any level of government, the people in charge have the broadest power. And the broadest power to do the job is the executive. A perfect example, if you look on page 47 at the bottom of the page, the first bullet under executive says, foster the education of applicants and licensees. Oh, so the syllabus I teach from was approved by the executive power, which means FREC approved that. The book you're using, who approved that? FREC. What gave them the authority to be able to approve that book?
Executive.
Would you think that maybe the worker bees might have done all the work?
Yes.
And they simply take their work to use as the decision making. Because we know the grunt work is not going to be done by the commission. The second power is quasi-legislative. Take the quasi off. What does that give you the authority to do?
To make regulations?
Take the quasi off. And what does it allow me to make? Laws.
Enact the laws.
Because that's legislative. So quasi means it looks like it, but it really isn't. But they have to be able to create something. Those are the rules. The rules of the commission are used to implement 475. If you read in 475, it'll make very broad statements. To understand that, you have to go read the rule that's associated with it. But FREC uses the rules to implement the requirements within law. The law doesn't dictate how much your fees are going to be. If you wanted to know how much your fees were going to be, based upon what we just read, would you go to 475 or would you go to the rules? I go to the rules. Who sets the fees? FREC does. Legislature does, well, quasi-legislature does. It's FREC that's setting the rules. The legislature created 475 and modifies 475 as necessary. But the implementation of 475 is done by FREC using their ability to create rules and regulations, which translates to under law. And these are the rules. If you don't like them, go find someplace else to live. Is that pretty close?
My house, my rules. Says mom.
I'm gonna see if you guys, you got that message, right? Let's find out how long it lasts. How many as long as it lasts at all? You forget who's in charge, you're gonna fail this test. You're getting better at thinking like an agent, but you gotta get a lot better. Or you get in those scenarios and you start thinking like a buyer or seller instead of the monkey in the middle. That's what you are. You're the monkey in the middle. You may be representing one side or the other. You may be representing both and may be representing neither. But you are part of that transaction. And the real parties are the buyer and the seller, or the landlord and the tenant. So you're the monkey in the middle. And it's your job to protect the public, even if you don't represent them. So if I know of something that's not readily observed, visibly, it's called material fact. If I know there's a problem with the house that you cannot readily see, and is not common knowledge, I have an obligation, as well as the seller, to disclose that. That's why we have the seller fill out a seller disclosure statement. Because the questions on that statement help identify the type of things that would be considered material facts. Something that affects the value of the property. And then the fourth one, or the third one, is quasi-judicial. If you take off the quasi, you've got what?
Official.
Judges.
Now, question. Can FREC give you a license?
No.
Yes. Because if you meet their requirements, they will authorize the department to give you a license. Can FREC take your license?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's quasi-judicial. Can FREC put you in jail?
No.
Can you be put in jail?
Yes.
They're misdemeanors for the most part. So, you ready? Moms, you ready? I brought you into this world.
I'll take that.
That's quasi-judicial. They have the authority to issue the license because you've met the requirements, and they have the authority to take you out if you don't follow the rules. Now, that test is looking to see if you'll follow the rules. So as we talk about things, and you get home and it don't sit well, we better talk when you come back. Because you don't get that straight in your head, and they stick it in a situation, they can eat you up. Class test, in my mind, is more of a regurgitation. A state exam is not a regurgitation. And I think sometimes people do better with situation questions. Because if you understand the basic concept, then the answer jumps off the page. When you have to learn cold facts, in my mind, that can be more difficult than being able to decipher a situation. Because I know the keys that I'm looking for. Who do I always put first? The public. And mom's there to make sure I do that. And now you're going home. Third grade.
Any homework assignment, what should we review?
Same as before.
That's it.
We finished chapter 2. You have questions for chapter 2? No. We haven't. Anybody that did not sign in?
There's some questions in the book as you go along. Just reinforces.
Take care.
All right,
Nice meeting you.
Okay. On unit 1. At first, what says is clean line, sales, business, that's page 4. All you have to do is just look it up, because these are all pages. The second one, we're talking about valuation, that's page 7. Jumping down to unit 2, which actually we saw. So anyhow, the first exemption is page 26. The requirements for broker's application is 30. The NOLA contingent is 20. Recognize how long the license application is valid is 26.
Oh my God, my legs.
And social security number, 25.
I
Those
do.
on those pages, what you find the highlights.
Okay, okay.
Yes, so those are the ones specific to the class.
Stretch there, and you're gonna run this nerve all the way down to the back of your leg, so you'll think gave out. Well, we're gonna like halfway down the distance.
Yeah, I couldn't
And
get
travel,
travel, man.
I have to see travel, but it's a day. And when you say cold, right, that's what I said. Because I think it's only dry too, using your left leg, and that's somebody. I can find yeah. Roll, like, even rolling a towel works
It's the
too.
real
But I
estate
keep it in
license
my
law.
car, because I have bad sciatic nerve. But I can tell by the
If you
way
give me the
I
paper,
sit.
you'll take
I
it.
did it that way.
Okay.
It's like, come like,
Thank you.
I said, I have it if I can.
Oh.
It's really bad.
Yeah,
And
but-
you- and I've got
but when you
the-
have sciatic nerve, you can't, it's almost like there's like a
Okay,
weight
I'm
in the
good.
back
Thank you.
holding you back.
And it hasn't been hurting, because when it hurts,
I can't walk.
yeah.
I had it with my kids, I couldn't walk for the last like 5 months of pregnancy, I had to crawl to the bathroom. That's how
I
bad
had
it
to
was.
do some prenatal scan.
And the thing is, they said with certain pregnancies, when they come.
Means that it's regulated by the
Yeah.
federal government.
Not be able to, they don't get it out.
Like if you go to the Bank of America, you go to
I'm curious to have,
any of the big wigs, they're all regulated by the
Senior and
federal
agony,
government.
I feel like, and especially when your temperature changes.
Oh, yeah.
When it goes hot to cold, I feel it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Terms you've never seen in your life.
No, we have massage therapist.
Yeah.
Full time.
Yeah, but he's flying with everybody. Oh, you don't have. the thing is, I can't do it full time because you don't make enough money, but I work for a bank, so I do like a little bit. I see it, but try the
You're
tennis
welcome.
ball. Do when you lay down at night, it works, you know, relieve a lot of those pressure points.
I have tons of tennis balls.
You
at
gotta
home.
turn the, don't forget to turn off the recording. You gotta turn that off.
Bye, Dal.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
You too. At least I had it on.